There's meeting the requirement, and then there is making the best thing you can when no one is asking you to do that.
Anywhere in the world in single-digit hours. That transports you into the future of what that world is going to be like when we're successful.
Our goal is in the next 2 years, we'll have the engine in the air.
We're not looking for like 1 to 2% gains. We are really looking at revolutionary gains here.
We're Astro Mechanica, building next-generation high-speed adaptive jet engines and a new model for supersonic passenger travel.
I'm Ian Brooke, founder of Astro Mechanica. We're developing all the technologies for ultimately a fleet of long-range supersonic passenger aircraft.
The vision is long-term, we want to do supersonic commercial travel and take it trans-Pacific. The way we're doing that is integrating both the engine and airplane development in-house. Engines are kind of the limiting factor here. Like if you look at where this has been done before, in the past 50 some odd years, the only thing that's existed was Concorde. Great plane, but was fuel inefficient. And so we're trying to make an engine where, it's equally fuel efficient as like a 787 or something like that to fly these distances, but you get there 4 times faster.
When S3 was here 2 years ago, there was probably only 1 propulsor stand, but now we've got 2 propulsor stands, and in the middle is our turbogen. The turbogen is what provides power for the whole thing, so we're burning jet fuel, turning that into electrical power, and then we're sending that over to either or both propulsors, which is what's providing the majority of the thrust.
So Gen 4 is a subscale compared to what we're calling Gen 5, which is the flight engine. It's intended to be identical in every way, just scaled down in terms of size and power. It's just quicker to iterate on something that's smaller. Kind of the core goal of Gen 4, in addition to having the full integrated system, is moving from like all the components are there in the propulsor and working to all the components are there and working well, which is a much bigger challenge.
The test you're going to get to see in a little bit today is we're going to start the middle turbogen. It's going to get up to power, and then we're going to demonstrate a hot fire because who doesn't like flames?
We're gonna make 3 civil aircraft sizes. The first one is like the size of a private jet. We call it the 5x5, 5 passengers, 5,000 nautical miles. And for me, targeting roughly a $5,000 operating cost for that trip. Then the sub 30 passengers, every seat is like a nice business class seat. The reason I would say 16 over like 30 is you know that you can always fill up 16 seats. That's gonna be the first plane where we would actually do per seat costs. Finally, you get to like 100 passenger-ish. We'll find out when we get to that one. It's kind of last step. To actually solve this for everybody, you can't just have this as like an elite thing. This is how Astro Mechanica ultimately captures a $500 billion a year market. Okay, now we can talk like how we actually get to these things. So this is gonna be like the end state for us. Phase 1, make new engines, get really good at it, make sure they're like good and reliable and so on, very performant. Then you make your first aircraft off of that. So, all right, we've learned as a team how to build an airplane, demonstrating the engine, buying down some of that risk. And you wanna do this, again, on the cheaper, smaller, simpler things, and definitely not with people on board. So we go to that third phase, that's gonna be the unmanned systems that we develop. And it'll be some hundreds of them. So we're gonna get them out in the field. You can push them really hard. Then we go to that like sort of, fourth phase. Now we're getting into like the main sequence. We'll have our billions at this point from all the prior businesses. When we go to like this first operation, we start picking a couple airports. They're like, all right, this is gonna be for SF to Tokyo or Paris, things like that. Now you've got the private jet network. It wasn't too many airplanes. You're starting to get the reps in on passenger flight ops and so on. Now you're in a good position to do that 16 passenger. We're scaling that process on the back of having like a good little charter business. Maybe this would be the equivalent to like when you're landing Falcon 9 and like, okay, now we're good at launch, we've got the things figured out, and now we're like getting the reps in and scaling. And then finally you get to the last piece of this, which is like you do the really big airplane. And now at this point, you have the solution for everything. This is the default way that we get around the planet.
Making an engine is really hard. We're trying to do it in an incremental fashion where we're leveraging existing industry experience along the way. So we're developing in-house right now is the propulsor section, which is cold, and there's in particular no hot turbo machinery, which is where a lot of existing industry development has gone, is trying to make these turbines run hotter and hotter and hotter. We're taking advantage of that development work, taking one of those existing turbo shafts or turbo fans, sticking it in our turbogen, hooking motors up to it, and then building the rest around it.
I first saw Ian post on Twitter. I'd only had Twitter for like 2 months. I direct messaged him. I said, hey, this is really cool. Can you talk? He responds immediately. We get on the phone, we speak for about 2 hours, and a couple things are very clear to me. One is that he has navigated basically all the conceptual levels of building an aerospace company for the next 30 years, back down to he has invented a new type of jet engine architecture, down to the fact that he could literally build these things himself. The second thing that stuck up very clearly in that initial conversation, he was saying, hey, here are the things I'm not good at. Like, he was like offering up things he was not good at. And for me, as a founder, I think you don't hear that very often from people. And then also the things that he happened to be not good at, I pride myself in. And so we had this really good conversation around how we might partner together.
I knew from about 15 that I really wanted to have an airplane company. I didn't like the way the other planes were built. For those that notice the details, they really appreciate it. Not everybody will see it. Apple embodies this completely. Like, even components inside of the phone that you're never gonna see, those should be like thoughtful and beautiful. Design was always incredibly important to me. And when you look at this with airplanes, it's like they're a little too functional in a way. Like, I want to make genuinely the best thing I can.
Before SpaceX, the rocket industry was like pretty similar to the existing like aerospace, airplane, engine industry. And I think maybe the main difference in the way we do things, or like a bunch of different new aerospace type companies versus the existing ones, is a lot of the old ones focus on having a process that, when followed, will produce a good product, right? The cost of doing that is, well, you spend a lot of time, you spend a lot of money, and things move really slowly. And the bet that we make is if you find like the best people and give them free rein to go do their job, you will be able to move more quickly. And the way in which we like make sure we have a good, safe thing at the end is by doing just an extreme amount of testing.
No, I do think there are great models. I mean, you look at SpaceX, you look at new space industry that have already forged ahead an incredible path for us. You see how they engineer differently and quickly and push the boundaries and fail fast. The other thing that's really interesting that Ian talks about often is very early on, he had the intuition to hire from rocketry, not from airplanes. And the reason he found that was it was very hard to get airplane people to move fast because they're optimizing for human safety. So we want them to go slow and be very careful, but rockets, the last thing that you do is add a person on it. So it's easier to take rocket people who know how to go fast and teach them about airplanes than teach airplane people how to go fast.
The default on everything is that it doesn't work. It is not useful to say, hey, this is all the ways it's not gonna work. Default is it's not going to work. What you need to focus on is, what are the ways that it can work? How do we make that happen? That is such a different frame of mind that you need to find in people.
I mean, we've always wanted to be a plane company from day one. And so I think starting to work on the airframe is kind of like starting to realize that dream. And it's also just kind of like important to start integrating the engine into the plane. There's not many planes you can kind of go find off the shelf, so to speak, that are going to be capable of flying supersonic, and like in particular also packaging kind of our unique engine configuration inside. Kind of knew from the beginning that we'd need to build the plane around it to be able to go fly and test it.
Astro Mechanica is reinventing travel from the engine forward. But it's the starting point. It's not the ending point, right? The engine forward. There's a hint at like there's more to come here. And then I love the concept of reinvention. Anywhere in the world in single-digit hours that transports you into the future of what that world is gonna be like when we're successful. I kind of offhandedly said this to a candidate one day, and he kind of pauses and looks off and says, wow, I could see my family in India more than once a year.
Ultimately, what I really want Astro Mechanica to be, just in the same way that we're like the pinnacle of craft and doing things well, I also just really want this to be the place for like truly the sharpest. This is like old NASA where you're like, this is like humanity's best. That's the other thing that this company really needs to be to do all this stuff. It should be something very special to be here. I need to reward that with like, and your peers, everybody is fully on this level. Because there's nothing more satisfying than like working with incredibly smart people on hard problems.
Some of you might remember when S3 covered Astro Mechanica 2 years ago. Matt talked to us about their engine approach. Ian took me up in an airplane and I was terrified. Traditionally, every major aerospace company designs the airframe first and figures out the engine later. It's normally an afterthought. But Ian and the team flipped that on its head. From first principles and a fuel efficiency perspective, what is the best possible engine they can build? The answer is duality. One engine, efficient at every speed, from takeoff to Mach 3. Nothing like it exists. But that's just the start of Astro Mechanica's vision. They're also trying to rethink what an airline even is. Small numbers of passengers, private jet level experience, and point-to-point supersonic on demand. You start with that, then eventually you can build a lower price point service in the future. Sort of like Tesla did. They started with the Roadster Model S and eventually built the Model Y and 3. At S3, our entire goal is to make science, engineering, and building the future more a part of mainstream everyday life. That's why we're making a limited edition shirt for every episode we make. It's also because we want stuff to wear on set when we film. So you can get this piece only for the next 2 weeks until the next S3 episode drops. Something from filming with Astro Mechanica that didn't make it to the episode is Ian's background. Ian has been flying himself and has been obsessed with aviation for a long, long time. And founders with that level of obsession are exactly the kind of people that E1 Ventures, this episode's partner, loves to back. E1 backs founders who turn science fiction into science fact, from deep tech to deep space. If you're building something extraordinary and are looking for investors who are as visionary as you are, reach out to E1 today and tell them that S3 sent you. Since last we filmed with them, Astro has raised around $27 million from A16Z, Lower Carbon Capital, and others. United Airlines Ventures made a strategic investment calling duality a novel approach to the engine problem. They built a proof of concept engine in 2 months, a flight-capable engine in 3, and now they're moving on to their first test flight, which you can bet we'll be back to capture when they're ready. That's it for this episode, but we'll see you in 2 weeks, where we'll fly high to look at a new vision of last-mile logistics. But until then, thank you for watching, and as always, keep on building the future.